Hello everyone, and welcome to Hotwire Native Live episode number 2. This week we are going to be talking about bridge components, what they are, how they work. We're going to dive into some code on the iOS side, the Android side, the Rails side. Yeah, this should be a good one. I'm seeing some familiar faces in the chat already. Hello everyone. As always, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. If they are relevant to what we're talking about right now, I'll try to answer them kind of in line. And if they are more abstract or about some other topic, I'll go through them all towards the end of the hour, and I'll get through as many as I can. So feel free to just use the chat as a Q&A, and I'll get to them, I'll get to them when I get to them. So, yeah. Let's, what is it? 3 past? Yeah, let's dive in. So, bridge components. This is the iOS side of Hotwire Native's bridge components documentation. What I really want to show you is this screenshot right here. It really shows off what bridge components can do visually. This one adds a little native button to the screen, right? So the way I like to think about bridge components is that there are times when you need to interact with the native side of your UI or your code, and your web interface can't access that. So you need to drop down into Swift for iOS or Kotlin for Android, and these bridge components give us kind of a, bridge into the native code base. And once we're in the native code base, we can do whatever we want in terms of UI or SDKs or APIs or anything. So what we're going to look at today is what the example apps, the demo app uses for bridge components. We're going to look through the code for the forum example, the simplest of the 3. And we're going to look at the code on iOS, on Android, and on in JavaScript and HTML, because that is how we wire everything up. So the first thing is let's just demo this thing, right? What do we build? What are we looking at here? So we have both the iOS and the Android app. This is pointing to the bridge components. We're getting this from the demo app, which is included in the demo for both the iOS and Android Hotwire native repos. I'm going to click forum example here and then forum example on Android. And you'll notice right from the start that we have a native submit button on iOS and a native submit button on Android. So this isn't coming from the web view directly, right? This is native code that's adding these 2 buttons here. And when we click this submit button, you'll see for a quick second that it disables, and then it goes away. So what we'll do here, we're running this against our local server, is we have a form. Let's look at our controllers here. We have our components controller. What we're going to do here is create a sleep 5 on our create function. Our create method in our Rails app, the demo server that's running locally on my machine here. So now when we do this form example and we click submit, you'll see that this is disabled for those 5 seconds, and then it submits the form. So remember, we're sleeping here in create before we then redirect to back to the show page, essentially. A pretty standard practice. So how does that interact with this component here? Same thing's happening on Android, right? Submit. We even get a nice little activity indicator, which is cool, part of just Android, actually. And then we get our form submitted. So we're going to dive into the iOS side first. Actually, no, we're going to dive into the Rails side first and kind of go from top to bottom, okay? So here is the form, We're looking at components new here, and you'll see here that we have a couple data attributes. Just to make that a little bit easier, we have two data attributes. You have data controller and data action. Data controller, stimulus, right? We're grabbing the bridge form stimulus controller, and then we have a bunch of actions that happen that are calling functions in there. So we have our bridge form controller over here on the right now. This is located in app JavaScript controllers in this special subdirectory called bridge, which is where we get that bridge dash dash from. It's namespacing. You can do this in regular stimulus. It doesn't have anything to do with a Hotwire native or bridge components, but it's a way of namespacing everything in a directory. So we have our bridge component here, and this looks, if you squint, this looks like a stimulus controller, and that's because it is. Bridge component extends from our base stimulus controller, right? So we get a couple more niceties, but essentially, if we get rid of all of this, on connect, we call this function, and this function does a this.send with the connect message, passing in the title of the element. Don't worry about this right now. We'll get to that in a second. So this.send is firing over the JavaScript bridge into Hotwire Native. Our Hotwire Native apps will listen for this send with a receive function and do something based on the message name and based on the parameters of this message, right? So if we open up our Xcode and we look at our form component, this is, again, back in the demo app for Hotwire Native, we have a form component that inherits from bridge component. I'll put this on the right, and I'll put our JavaScript on the left here. So we've called this component form. We match that up with the name of the component on iOS and Android to know how they match. And now, anytime we call send, we fire on receive in the iOS app. We get a property called message, and then we're doing something with that message, right? But what we're looking at here right now is this connect. When we see connect, we're going to handle connect, right? We're going to parse some stuff out, configure the bar button, but what we're really doing here is adding a button to the right bar button item, which is this right here. I'm going to demonstrate how we can just quickly work with this and change this to left bar button item. Run the iOS app. We made changes to native code, so we have to rerun the code there. Now when we go to the bridge component, we should see that submit button is now on the left because we've set left bar button item, right? So you can see how we're accessing native APIs here. All the Rails side is saying like, hey, connect. That's the name of the function, or sorry, the name of the message, and then giving us a payload, okay? That payload is part of message. We have this special function on message called .data that we're then turning into message data. That's something we define. I command clicked to scroll us down to the bottom of the page here, but we have this message data is our own little struct here that has a submit title attribute. You'll notice that matches this, right? So this is actually shorthand in JavaScript for submit title. It's creating a key value pair there by using the same thing. And we parse that out. And we grab that submit title and we pass it to our configure bar button function, right? We pass that title down and then we're setting the title of that there. So if we changed submit button title to, Marco, because I see him in the chat there, and then I saved this, I'm only going to refresh this page here. I'm not going to have to rerun the app. We'll see that we get Marco. So this submit title is getting passed over the bridge component, over the wire, and we're then parsing it out on the client. Let's go back to right bar button item. Bruce is asking here, was the done button hidden when submitting is on the right? Hidden? Actually, it was just overriding it. It happened after. By default, in app delegate, we have show done buttons on modal set to true here. That is just adding a done button on the right to every modal in iOS. So that happens first, and then our bridge component fires after the page loads, which is just overriding it. Oops. I like the way that classic looks, so we're going to just change that real quick. Marco asks, does it also disable the inputs on the form? It doesn't directly, but we are just submitting the form for real, so you'll see how that works in a second. We'll get to that, how that's all wired up in 1 minute. Okay, so let's undo this. The submit button.title, back into our form. There's a lot of code in here, but if we just wanted to add that button, we can delete this. We can delete all of this. We can delete pretty much all of that. And we only have something that looks a little bit smaller. I just forgot to close curly brace there. But what we have that does all of this, we have also this submit enabled and submit disabled. So that's what I commented out down here. These are other special functions that are coming from our HTML, right? So we have the component new page. Remember we had these actions? So a quick stimulus refresher is saying on the turbo submit start event. So this is listening for when this form fires the turbo submit start event. It's going to fire the submit start function on the bridge form controller. So the submit start function is right here. We are submit this.submit target.disabled. So Marco, that's where the submit target visually is being disabled, right? Because we are hijacking that. And then we're sending over the wire a new message called named submit disabled. So when the iOS app sees the submit disabled, it's calling handle submit disabled, which is taking that button and setting is enabled to false. That's how we get well, let me run it again. Change some code there. That's how we get the button to be grayed out when we click it there. I think I have some formatting that's incorrect here. Let me... Oh, yeah, and there we go. Now we have, it's disabled for those 5 seconds as the request submits. And then when it's done, we do the same thing but opposite on turbo submit start. We then also have turbo submit end, where we call bridge form submit end. And submit end, throw a star there to highlight it, we call submit enabled. We re-enable the button. I bet you can imagine what that does. Submit bar button item is enabled equals true. So we were able to toggle the native button by listening in on the form submission events directly from Hotwire native, or from Turbo.js, which really creates this nice boundary where it's like the stimulus controller is responsible for just saying, hey, the form is submitting, go do your thing. Where the iOS and then eventually the Android code doesn't have to actually know if the form is submitting or not. It just has to know, should it be enabled or disabled. This is a really good technique I encourage you to follow of keeping your controllers, your components, I should say, on the native side as like dumb as possible. You don't want business logic in here, right? We're sending the title over the wire. We're sending the when it's enabled, when it's disabled over the wire. We don't want to hard code. We want to hard code as little as possible in our components on the native side, so we can reuse this on different parts of our app. If we had hard coded the title button to save post or whatever, we would never be able to use that when we used it for an edit form, right? So keeping everything dynamic makes it really nice because we can just pass that stuff over the wire. Jesse asks here, realizing that bridge components are not that different from standard Rails view components. It's fundamentally just view components, but specifically for Hotwire, iOS, and Android apps. If you replace view components with stimulus controllers, I agree with that. I don't know what a standard Rails view component is. I guess like the third-party one, but maybe I'm misinterpreting that. They're more similar to stimulus controllers on both sides that interact with each other. Jesse, let me know if I'm misinterpreting that there. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how iOS does this, right? We talked about getting data to the client, but we didn't talk about this thing right here. How do we actually submit the form? How do we know that the button was clicked? And then we need to actually submit the form on the website. So here's our connect function. We call handle connect event. We call configure bar button. We then create this action here. This action, I'm going to set a breakpoint, is called when we click on the button, because we've wired it up in that our item, our bar button item, has a primary action of action. Our action does some stuff. You know, we're in this callback right here. This action is replying to the event that was passed to us. So the bridge component fired an event to us. It's now waiting. And then our iOS app finally is like, hey, they clicked the button. Reply to the connect event name. That then triggers this callback right here. So we have our JavaScript callback right here. I forgot the exact name of, I guess, function. And then what that's doing is grabbing the submit target and clicking it. This is special because we're not submitting the form directly. We're just clicking the web button, the web submit button. So that means we get all of the functionality. Mark, will go back to your question of does it also disable the inputs in the form? It doesn't directly, but because we're submitting the form as if a user had clicked it, we're getting all the benefits of a standard Rails form, right? So I'm going to just comment out some CSS here for a sec. We'll talk about that, how that works in a second. No peeking. And we're going to see what happens here. I just commented out some CSS. We're reloading the page. Let's rerun the app just to be safe. And now we're going to have the submit button, the web one as well. So we now have this web submit form, right? When I click submit on the native side, I run, we see that the native or the web-based submit form is disabled. We didn't do that ourselves anywhere. That just comes from, I think, what does it come from? Turbo.js that knows how to disable the form field and disable the submit button, right? So we get that benefit for free. We're just clicking on that button. If we were to click this button here, we get that same behavior. You'll notice that this also disables. They work together because we're listening for events. We're not wiring things up in terms of like, hey, when they click this, do that. It's like, no, when the form is submitted, do the thing. When we reply, click the button. Now, why does this button show up? And why did I comment something out to hide it? So I have this, we have this native.css file, right? And if we look at our application, oh, we don't actually need that anymore. We have this CSS that says hide the submit button when the form component is registered. So what the hell's going on here, right? Data bridge component form, data controller bridge form, type submit. What the hell? What is this, right? Let's look at the DOM. And we will comment this out so we can see it. So I'm going to open up Safari and do develop, simulator, new. We'll talk about debugging next week. I think this is a pretty important topic to go over. But here's our submit button, right? We wired it up to our um, debugger here. And you'll notice that on the HTML, we have these two data bridge platform, data bridge components. We didn't add those. That came from Hotwire Native's bridge aspect in iOS. So iOS is actually running some JavaScript that injects that into our HTML. So that gives us a, if we do document dot query selector, right? We can grab data bridge components. We're going to grab the HTML document, right? We can now also grab data bridge components tilde equals form. And now we've selected all of the data attributes that have form as a value in data bridge components. So this essentially says target anything where the iOS or Android app. Bruce is saying that he's getting my audio twice. If anyone else is experiencing that, let me know. It might be a problem on my end, but Bruce, you might have the Twitter stream and the YouTube stream open, or LinkedIn stream, or just YouTube twice. If someone could chime in, letting me know if they have double audio, that'd be great. Oops. So we have that selector. Let's look at our. Then we're grabbing data controller bridge form. So this is saying let's target everything with that element. Let's dive into bridge form. You'll see now that we're grabbing the actual form itself. So we've now grabbed the form, and finally we can grab the submit button. So that is type equals submit. And now we've grabbed just that submit button. So this is saying, like, for apps, for user agents that have registered for the form bridge component, grab the data controller bridge form, and then find the submit button and then hide it. So if we run this same query, when we run this on localhost for bridge components form example, if we try to run this here, we get a null element, right? We can't even get because we're failing on the first. You can't see that, can you? Let's hide my screen. I guess audio goes away when I hide myself. The short of it is that we don't have this like we do on the iOS app, right? So we don't have data bridge components, so our query selector is failing. So we don't target it. It means we don't hide this. So on iOS and then Android, we hide it because we have a native one, and on web, we keep our submit HTML button. That's a little bit of kind of like advanced stuff for bridge components. If you are wondering how all this pieces together, again, the demo app, which is, you know, on GitHub, Hotwired, the iOS demo app is just Hotwire native iOS and then demo. You can download this Xcode project, demo.xcodeproj. Open that in Xcode, and then also the Hotwire native demo has the Rails app that you can run where you can start playing around with this. This is a really helpful way to just get like a good base of these examples. There's the tab bar in there. There's all that stuff that you can use to really, really get started. Okay, let's, any more questions on how all of it works, the point of it, what are some things it can do? If not, I'm going to move on to Android, and then we're going to show some more exciting examples than just a form. So we have uh, gone through the iOS stuff. We've gone through what it looks like for the different clients in terms of like how they style it and stuff, how to hide elements. Android works pretty much the same, but the code obviously looks different, right? So I think it'd be helpful if we ran into some of the Android code here. For fair warning, there's about 3 times as much Kotlin as there was Swift, and that has to do mostly with how Android APIs work. So we're just gonna like kind of glance over this and pretend that we're looking at the iOS stuff and I'll show you where the differences are. Okay. It might be a little overwhelming, but I do actually want to throw them side by side because we can run some really nice comparisons. And I find Swift just a little bit easier to work with, but I might be biased. So iOS on the left, Android on the right. The initializer kind of looks the same, right? We have a form component. It inherits from bridge component. We don't have the name outlined in the class. That instead is in our application file. We register bridge components here. So here's where we register the name form to the form component. Yeah, at least fair. Kotlin is much easier to work with than Java. So that's just like one difference there is that on iOS you'll do it in the class. On Android you'll do it in your like high level configuration. Fragment is pretty much how we grab a reference to our view controller. So if you look at it, these are kind of like the same thing. We're grabbing it even the same way, delegate.destination, casting it to a view controller or a fragment. We have an onReceive function, which looks very similar to iOS's onReceive function. Our same three events that we're listening for: connect, enabled, disabled. That's kind of where the differences or the similarities end, because our connect event is doing something a little bit differently. On Android, we can't just arbitrarily add buttons to the toolbar, so we actually have to use a layout inflator, which is grabbing a layout. So let's see here. This form component submit binding is a fancy way of saying here we have a layout, and all that layout is a material button, right? So we look at this. Let's see if I can get a good example. It's just a button. So we did all this XML just to create a little button. But we inflate that XML as a binding, and then we attach it to the screen there as the submit menu item. So we remove it first, and then we add it to the menu, which is the toolbar up at the top. A lot of this stuff is like, is Android, is working with the Android UI. Comments like this are super helpful. This isn't Hotwire native specific anymore, and that's kind of the blessing and the curse of bridge components, is like, you're just in Android world now. So we got to do Android stuff, right? But this function right here is really good to generate from an LLM or a GPT, because this is just boring Android stuff. You're going to write the same code that you would if this was a Hotwire native app, or if this was a fully native Android app. The difference here is like when you call perform submit, instead of replying to the function, you would do something like actually submitting your native form. So once you kind of get the glue in place, once you kind of have your scaffolding outlined, you can be like, hey, ChatGPT, how do you add a button to the toolbar on Android? And then just like, boom, you're in there. Really helpful to look at this. I think form component's a great way to have a really basic, but not a basic but advanced, a basic but a good coverage of what actually works in the bridge components on Android there. And we get the same functionality, right? Submit button, get a little activity indicator, which is nice, and 5 seconds later we will submit. All right, so I don't know if I need to dive into anything more on Android. I don't want to, just because I feel like we're getting to specifics. I'd rather show you something that's really exciting. I'd rather show you a really cool bridge component that's like, you know, at the other end of the spectrum. So let's do that. Bruce, I'll get to your question towards the end just because it's a little not exactly what we're covering here. Okay, so what are like some really good examples of bridge components, right? Like let's see something that is like really sexy, right? So one of the things that I really love to show is a way to have a fully native menu in the app, right? So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show, this is my library of free bridge components, right? It's Joe Mazzolotti's GitHub bridge components. And I'll drop a link to this in the chat so you can follow along if you wanted to. But down here we have something called menu component. Now, where'd we go? Menu component. And what this does is it adds this ... on iOS that renders a native UI menu. And then on Android, we get the same thing with also a native drop-down menu on Android. And this shows like kind of what we were working with, but a level up, right? Instead of just a button, it's a whole on menu. And there's even more, I think even some even really exciting ones like the share component where we can have the share sheet, a toast component. And then we also have these like really advanced one. These are more paid, or these are paid. They require a one-time payment to access these with the barcode scanner. So this is using like the native SDKs to scan barcodes, a document scanner, which does all the auto correction and everything, and a location component along with a notification token component. So some really cool stuff there. If you want to check those out, I just dropped a link. But let's integrate one of these and show how easy it is to add a new bridge component to an app once you already have the code for it, and we can just drop it in. So we'll do the menu, and we're going to grab the Kotlin file, the Swift file, and the menu controller file, right? Here is the controller for, what is this? Stimulus controller. So I'm going to copy the raw file. I'm going to open up our form controller. We're going to create we already have a menu controller. So do I want to override it or do I want to? Yeah, let's just override it. So we already have a menu controller. We're just going to drop this in as the new menu controller. We don't care what the code does, right? We're going to use it. We're not going to modify it right here. We're going to grab the Swift code, copy that, open up Xcode. And we already have a menu component, but what I'm going to do on iOS is I'm going to delete that menu component, try to build. We'll see that we have an error in our app delegate. Configure higher, because our menu component doesn't exist here, right? So let's just delete that. I'll get to that in a sec. So we're going to create a bridge, new empty file. We're going to call it menu component.swift, and then we'll paste this whole thing in, do a command B to build. We're good. And then we want to register that component. So here we want to register the menu component with the other two. There's no diff there because it's exactly what it said before, but wanted to show you the full approach there. Okay, so we have two of the three parts, right? We have our stimulus controller, we have our native component, we need our HTML. So let's copy paste from the README this right here. This is just HTML, right? So we don't have to worry about what language or sorry, if it's like an ERB or anything. And we're going to add this to the components menu. And we are going to just get rid of that, add that, and delete all of this because we don't want to confuse anyone. Let's run our iOS app. And what we added here was two links that have these data bridge attributes, which we'll get to in a second. If we now go to bridge components and we go to the menu example, you'll see that we have this dot dot dot. We also have the two links, and this dot 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 now gives us 1 and 2, just like we had in the the demo. Impressive, kind of, but here's where we can start to get really exciting. So all of this is dynamic, right? If we want to make this one to, let's say, Joe, or no, let's make something a little bit more interesting there. Let's make this to be a link to our bikes. And we're also going to want to change the href to, /bikes or whatever. And this one going to be shoes. This one will be shoes. We can open up SF Symbols, which is a free app you can download from Apple. And let's search for bike. Bicycle looks good. I'm going to copy the name. And we're going to add that as the Data Bridge iOS image. And instead of shoes, we're going to do helmet. So bike and helmet, kind of like a gear tracker or whatever. And we're going to grab helmet name right here and drop that in. Save that. Now here's a cool part. I'm not even going to rerun the app. I'm not even going to build it anymore. I'm just going to refresh this page. And now our dropdown has a bike and a helmet. Totally dynamically from the HTML. We didn't have to change any iOS code, any JavaScript code. It would work the same on Android. All we had to do was change some HTML attributes to get a dynamic image from SF Symbols here, and also to set that title. The href here goes to helmet and to bike. That doesn't exist on our server, but I'll show you the 404 that happens, right? We don't have that page. So we could do something like, what's our routes file look like? I think it looks like bugs, tabs. Just I want to get, a link here. And yeah, here's a page, Again, dynamic. Didn't even have to rerun the app. Just refresh the page. We just fixed a bug. If this was deployed to production, no iOS resubmissions, no Android resubmissions. Just deploy this change to your server. Oops. Menu show. Menu? Components menu. There we are. So taking this one step further, let's see if I have it in the docs here. Hide the HTML submit button. Yep, let's copy paste that. That should be the HTML. PR's accepted. But let's open up that custom native CSS file. We'll copy and paste this in. And now when we refresh the page, 1 and 2 will be hidden. Boom. We don't need to show anything for this menu because we already have that native component. If our iOS app didn't register that component, let's go to app delegate and comment out menu component and rerun the app. When we get to this page, we will still see the HTML because it's not registered, right? Bridge components menu. We don't have the native stuff, but we have the HTML. So we've also have graceful deprecation? Graceful buzzword. If your client doesn't yet support a bridge component, we'll just get the HTML like normal. We don't lose out on any functionality. We don't have to worry about API compatibility. It's just, hey, do you support this? Cool. You now have the native button, and we're going to hide the HTML to make your experience just a whole lot better. Running it again as proof. And we have it back. Bike and helmet. So that was one of the many examples that we can work with when doing bridge components. The flow for Android is pretty much the same copy paste. I don't need to go through that, I don't think. But you're doing the same thing, just copy paste the Kotlin file and you are off to the races. I think that Toast, you know what? Let's here look at what we added. So here's the JavaScript file, the bridge component that we added. We only have a connect and a disconnect. Connect adds a button, disconnect removes a button. And what we're doing here is iterating through our item targets and just saying, hey, add an item, add a menu item, add a menu item, add a menu item for blah, 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 blah. And for the code on iOS, we have an we have a function that says add menu button that, iterates through each item and adds an action to our array and then adds a menu with those children. So we're translating this like directly to a native UI menu API. We're using a first party thing, like this little drop down here, as great as it is first party too. So if Apple updates that to add new API in the future, boom, we send a new attribute over the wire. We assign that with like a, if, we could do something like if maybe iOS 19 is out, right? We can start doing action.iOS 19 only thing here. So we can start to customize that and full backwards compatibility with old apps because we have it wrapped there. Yeah, just really, really powerful stuff, and works in a way that you can start to add this across different pages. We're running the app right here, right? Let's just say that we wanted to add it to this navigation homepage, right? I'm gonna copy paste this. We're gonna go to navigation index. Nope, nav show. I'm just gonna plop this in down on the bottom here. So we're on the page you're seeing on the iOS app. I've added the data controller and all of the attributes. I'm gonna refresh this. And I think I'm on the wrong page here. Navigations. Only show. Dashboard. Dashboard, here we are. We're going to add it to the dashboard partial or dashboard layout. And we now have this data controller on our dashboard, which is this page here correctly now. When I refresh, boom, native button. We added it now to a new page just by adding HTML. And same customizations can apply, the iOS image, the Android image. We didn't have to resubmit the apps. We just added a native component to a new screen. So once you have this like baseline scaffolding in place, you can just start dropping these across your app. It's and then just deploy your server and you're good. I love it. It's pretty awesome. Okay, going to switch gears a little bit. We got 15 minutes left. I'm gonna go through some Q&A. So I think there's only one question that I haven't answered yet, but if you have anything else, just pop it into the chat there and then I will answer it. I will answer it live. So let's see. So Bruce here asks general Hotwire native question concerning async await in Swift. How does this work with Hotwire native? How do you make sure the UI stays responsive? I'm new to Hotwire and Rails. So we use async await when we start to get into the bridge components. Let me see if I used it at all in I think the form component. I'm gonna look a little bit before. I guess it's all synchronous. Async await is like just a way of making things pop off a thread, right, and do some background processing, or to have something process in the background. So Ruby, everything is blocking. If you make a network request with like Faraday or whatever, the next line of code doesn't run until that network request completes. It's all linear. On Swift and Kotlin, you have to kick something off onto a background thread, and that's what async await gives you. So like async is saying, hey, this function is asynchronous. It's gonna return on a different thread. It doesn't return immediately. And await is saying, hey, wait for this to finish and then do the next step. I think it plays really nicely with Hotwire native because most of the time you are clicking a button and then something's happening. So you're already in an asynchronous context, right? Like you're not, whenever the page finishes loading, do this thing. You're already waiting for something to happen. So if you then wait a little bit longer, it's actually a really good data flow because you're just like, hey, they clicked the button. Cool. Wait for this network request to go. Now show the thing. That's why disabling that submit button works really well. That's why having control over the activity spinner on Android, I think it works really well. you'll run into, I'm talking bridge component wise, you will run into some issues if you try to add async await stuff to like Hotwire native core, like trying to return a custom view controller in the handle delegate callback. Like you can't do that asynchronously because the function isn't asynchronous. But if you're doing that, you're kind of doing something weird. So when it makes sense, async await is a really good tool to keep our code flat and linear, and most importantly, looking more like Ruby. Hopefully that answered your question there, Bruce. Yes, our glass morphism. I'm just waiting for skeuomorphism to come back because I'm sure it will be. We're about at that cycle of everything that was old is new again, and I'm sure we will eventually get skeuomorphism back on iOS as we leave the flat era. Mike Johns asks, do you have any suggestions for customizing styling for the native tab bar, native menu, like for a specific color to match the background, the WebView app background? Yeah. Let me see if I have, give me a sec here. So let's hide that. I have this post on how to make opaque navigation and tab bars in Hotwire Native on my blog here, right? Which is turning this like weird transparentness into something that actually covers the screen, which I feel like is a little more correct. So it looks like this. But the same approach applies. We have these appearance proxies, they're called. So UI navigation bar appearance, we're giving us setting the scroll edge appearance and then the tab bar. You can create your own appearance and set background colors on this, right? So I'm going to open up the app delegate here, and we're just going to go to the bottom. So here we have configure appearance. This is again from the demo app. So if I do a let appearance equal UI navigation bar dot appearance dot dot appearance dot configure. Okay, so we have an appearance that we configured with an opaque background, so you can't scroll. You don't see it through, right? I can grab appearance dot so, and then, okay, so we've created a reference to a UI navigation bar appearance. We configured it with an opaque background, and let me set the background color to orange. So if we run this, we now have an orange background. Beautiful. But the same thing can be applied to the tab bar at the bottom. We can not do an opaque background to make it more see-through. Obviously, your brand color is going to be play a little bit nicer with that. And then on Android, we have the layout file. So I'm in the demo app. I go to I go to res for resources, and then layout activity main. We have the fragment container view, but we also have the bottom navigation view. So here's where you could actually start giving it, for the bottom bar, background, making it, black or whatever here. And we have this black bar at the bottom, but each one of these has its own color. So you'd have to start to look at each of the tints, not the tints, sorry. You have to look at the styles. So we have a toolbar and the app bar layout, and then when it's tinted, and then the bottom navigation view. Actually, you know what? Don't do it in here. Do it in styles, because here we can actually just say, here's the Android background. Instead of being the color surface, let's make it I like black because it's easy to see. So now the Android background is black. Go away, Apple Music. The Android background is, and the item background is black. And open that up. And we should have black across here. So a little more tweaking will be required on Android because now we have to have the selected color to be different, right? For the text there, because we can't read black on black. But everything you want to do in this styles.xml file, I recommend just like copying this from the demo app into your app, because then you know exactly what to customize. Hopefully that was helpful, Mike. Do you think you could get an app on the public test flight stage after initial app with no? Do you think an app could get to the public test flight stage, so after an initial app review with no in-app purchases? So I'm assuming that you mean that it's an app that would require in-app purchases according to Apple, but you don't want to use them and you want to get to public test flight to distribute it to 10,000 folks. Maybe. I don't want to say yes. Apple's definitely less rigorous with the testing for public test flight, but also keep in mind that builds expire after, I think, 60, maybe it's 30 days now. So like if you're not updating constantly, that will just get uninstalled, or they'll try to open it and it'll be like, hey, this expired. So they do a good job of making sure that you're only using it for like actual testing instead of distributing your app that way. But if you are thinking about something where you're like, I only want a certain subset of users to use this app, you could look at enterprise distribution, which means that folks can only download it through a URL that you provide to them, which means it's not listed in the App Store. And if you do enterprise distribution, last I checked, you're not required to use in-app purchases because they've essentially already bought access to that app through your enterprise, your own enterprise stuff. So maybe I'm reading too much into your question there, but hopefully that helps kind of settle what you're thinking with that. If not, send me an email. Happy to chat more on that. 90 days. Okay. I don't know. I think that's for internal testing. Sorry, Eduardo's saying here that test flight apps expire in 90. I think that's only for internal testing. External testing might be 30 or it might be longer. I haven't used external in a while. But yes, internal testing is 90. Again, from Eduardo here, how am I handling in-app purchases for subscriptions like you're doing on Rails devs? Revenue Cat. I'm using Revenue Cat for everything. Revenue Cat gives me a standard API to use on the client and the server. It also aggregates all of the notifications from the server and sends them to my server as like, hey, user 3 bought whatever thing at timestamp. I don't have to worry about listening for Apple and for Android. It makes it really helpful in building out these apps, and it's very generous pricing. If you're doing $2,500 in monthly revenue, it's totally free, and then it's just 1% after that. And each month, starts there. So if you do $3,000 worth of revenue, it's 1% on that $500, and so on. I use this a lot. I have a bridge component that like fires off this to make the request, and the server does some stuff with pay. There's a lot to get into here, definitely more than 5 minutes, but this is a really good start just to make things a little bit easier for you. It's not required. If you do sign up for Revenue Cat, tell them that I sent you and let me know, because I can help out with getting you to prioritize support, and then also I get a little bit of a kickback as a referral there. So let me know. Bruce asks, Hotwire with SwiftUI instead of UIKit. Right now you have to use UIKit for the core of the app, but that does not stop you from using SwiftUI to render custom individual screens. So I think the demo apps, I'm double checking in the background here. The numbers view controller. No, we're still using that. Framework. We're using SwiftUI somewhere. Source. Turbo. Web turbo error. Error review? Yeah, there we go. So This is in Hotwire's core, right? So we're looking at Hotwire native iOS. It's in source, turbo, helpers, error presenter. This is SwiftUI. Every error screen that you view is rendered with SwiftUI. And what it does is it's not using SwiftUI like as a SwiftUI. It's just using SwiftUI to render the view. That's it, right? So we have the error presenter, which takes a UI hosting controller and wraps our error view in it. And that bridges the gap from SwiftUI to UIKit there in a way that lets us just render SwiftUI screens as part of the UIKit framework. So we'll just recommend using that. It works perfectly. And let's see, do I have the blog post published yet? I'm writing it. It's coming soon. But if you go to my book on Hotwire Native, which is on sale for the rest of the week also, I'll drop a discount code in there. But my book talks about how to do that. It dedicates an entire chapter to rendering native screens with SwiftUI. You can even read a little excerpt on that about how to route it with a path configuration, handling that, and then using the where are we? UI hosting controller to render that SwiftUI screen there. So, oh, nice. Glad to hear you purchased the book. Thanks for the support, Bruce. If anyone else wants to grab a look at that, there's a link in the comments there for it. Yeah, I think that this is probably where we... Thanks, Marco. I'm seeing your pull request to update the title and menu component. Really appreciate that. So I think this is going to wrap it for today. Thank you, everyone who joined. Looks like, according to StreamYard, I'm at there were 200 people that checked this out live, which is super exciting. If you have any more questions, definitely just drop me an email. It's all over my website. My website also has links to everything that we talked about today. And I think most importantly, if you're watching this stream, then check out those bridge components that I shared, the link to the bridge components that I shared earlier. Where am I? So GitHub, Joe Mazzolotti bridge components, that is a collection of, I think it's 12 or 13 free components. And then the paid components are, of course, optional, but those are for the more intense things like getting push notification tokens, priority support from me. And that's only a one-time purchase for the lifetime of that code base. So it's not like a monthly or annual subscription or anything. You just get it for life. That will wrap, I think. If anyone has any other questions, you know my email address. If not, Mazzolotti.com. And Bruce is asking if I'm going to Rails World. Yes, I'm presenting. I'll be giving a talk on Hotwire Native at Rails World. I'll also be giving a live workshop at RailsConf. So if you're going there, I will see you there. If you're going to Rails World, I'll see you there. So until next time, everyone, I'm going to hang around just until everyone drops off. But I will see you soon. Have a great one.